Welcome to Subramani. I have made one video saying what are the questions that you should be asking for before your second marriage. So this is more specific. This is what are the financial questions that you should be asking regarding when you're getting married to a person, especially the second marriage, not the first marriage, because in your first marriage you may not have asked these questions. Good, bad, I'm not getting into it, but in the second marriage these questions are more important. So the first question to ask is, what are the assets that you're bringing into the marriage? That is important to know. And second, what are the liabilities that you're bringing into the marriage? Also remember, when the person, when let's say a 50-year-old male or a 52-year-old male comes into the marriage where he has a nice big house, the first question to ask is the loan paid off? Because if you assume that you're going to live in that house and something happens to him, it sounds very sinister, but if it happens to him and you find that a big part of the house has been funded with the debt which you can't afford to repay, then you have to reconsider what to do. So that's a very important question. Second question is, how are you going to handle finances for children? Divorced parents feel more guilty about their children, saying, oh my God, I should not be responsible for their lack of prospects in their career. So I found one friend wanting to pay 80 lakhs for his son's education in Europe, and his total net worth was about 2 crores. So I said, you just don't have the money to pay because you're already 54 years of age or 53 years of age. You just don't have enough time because you need about 7 crores for your own retirement. All you have is 2 crores. If you give away 80 lakhs, you will be left with nothing. So he had to then compromise. He had to tell his son that he didn't have the cash. His wife said, no, you have the cash, and it again led to a lot of bitterness. So find out whether there is going to be any bitterness from the previous marriage, whether there is any alimony, or even if there is alimony, that is quantified. But if it's an unending thing, saying, oh, this is for my son, I have to do, this is for my daughter, I have to do, then they also get to, they know that this is a place from where they can get as much money as they want. That's fine between you and your children, but once you get married, your spouse needs to know how much of this cash is going to go away. Because if you can't quantify, there is no way how she can quantify, how your second wife can quantify how much money you have, how much you will need. So if you are getting married at a later age, maybe around 50, then the question to ask for each other is, are you going to be self-sufficient without this marriage? Is she dependent on this marriage for her day-to-day living, or is he going to depend on her for his retirement? These are questions to ask, especially for women and men who have a pension. That pension could be a great attraction. So make sure they are not falling prey to a marriage where they are seeing the money that you have, because you are not able to see the money that they have. Right? So if he's a businessman, you can find out how much he's earning. If he's employed in a company, you can more or less guess how much he's earning. You can talk to people and find out. Right? Are you a saver or are you a spender? Right? So a couple who got married earning 1 lakh each, one was saving 90,000, one was saving maybe 9,000. That was a huge gap. They both knew, the girl knew how much the guy was earning. She had no clue how much he was spending. Right? So this was a first marriage, but I'm saying in the second marriage these questions become more important, because you're going to share your income and you're going to share your balance sheet. So in case you need to protect your assets and you're a man, please consider a prenup agreement. That's going to be very important. How much of funding will you do for your siblings, if any? If your sibling comes and asks for a loan, will you give? Will you not give? How much will you help your parents? Will your parents live in an old age home? Will your parents move in with you? Will you move in with your parents? Right, these are questions to ask, and these questions are not just from an emotional point of view, but also from a financial point of view. How are you going to handle these questions? If one is a spender and one is a saver, there is going to be a problem. What happens if he assumes that you will be paying for the vacations? Are you going to spend on vacations together? Are you going to spend your money on your vacations? And knowing all this is also important. Or say, okay, beyond a particular point we will spend our own money, but jointly we will do this. So currently both of you are earning, maybe both of you are earning say 5 lakhs each. per month, then the question is only for the bigger things. You don't have to worry about who will buy a fridge and who will buy a washing machine. But if you're taking an expensive vacation, say you're going to Europe and it is going to cost you about 5-6 lakhs each, so it's going to cost you 12 lakhs for the vacation. Will he pay for it? Will you pay for it? Will you go on such vacations? Will you take children on such vacations? It's important to talk about these things, because these may sound very trivia, but it is not going to be trivial once you start living together, right? So I mean, I'm not even getting into whether you're going to eat veg food or non-veg food, whether you're going to smoke or drink. Those are questions which you must ask anyway. But I'm saying, what are the financial implications of doing all this, right? Will you relocate to a different city? I mean, let us say both of you are earning equal amount of money, and one is in Delhi, one is in Bombay. Are you going to move to Delhi? Are you going to, or is he going to move to Bombay? If your parents are staying nearby, and you are a big support for them, both emotionally, physically, financially, will you be able to give as much time for them? Because now you're going to spend time between your new husband, your children and your parents. So getting their consent, even financially, is important. Giving away all your money to your children is a good idea, but at 50 or 55, that's a good idea. But remember, when you're 32, you got another 50-60 years of compounding. Your wealth is going to grow. How are you going to share the growth in wealth of assets which you already have? What happens at 60 or 65? You realize that your children don't need your money because they're reasonably well settled, they're earning well, or they're well qualified, but your husband needs. Remember, by this time your marriage would be 20 years old, because by that time you could take decisions very differently. So even if you have made your will, remember that your will may have to be redone, saying, okay, I will leave some money for my spouse. Like I'm leaving 2 crores for my kids, and I will leave 50 lakhs for my spouse, just in case the spouse has an emergency. Or you tell your kids that, look, in case he has an emergency or she has an emergency, then you will chip in, right? Because by the time this is happening, you're 32 when you got married, and you're 65 when you're doing these considerations. Good chance that the kids would have got integrated and they would be part of the system. But immediately, if something were to happen, how are they going to react, right? Are you bringing any debt into the marriage? Not just housing debt, but some personal debt, etc. This is not visible unless you look at the person's CIBIL score. Sounds very sinister, but at 50, if you get married without checking out the other person's CIBIL score, you're not being very smart, right? You have to be careful about that. How much are you willing to compromise on the standard of living? If a girl gets into a marriage, or a woman gets into a marriage and finds, oh my God, there is no saving left, I would have no sympathy. I would have said you should have asked those questions first. Will talking about finances before the marriage help? Yes, it will help. It is worth talking about those things. It may stop you from going ahead at all with the whole process of getting married, right? How will you also physically, how will you share family responsibilities? Some community men tend to help, right, from buying vegetables, cutting vegetables, and around the house. Some community guys may or may not. I'm not trying to say everybody will or nobody will, but if you have got used to one spouse who was doing all that work, like if you were married to a woman who was a housewife, she was doing all the work, she was doing a fantastic job, and suddenly she was killed in an accident or something like that, you will keep comparing your second wife to her and say, oh, you're not doing anything, she was doing things like this, etc., etc. All that could lead to a crisis. How many servants you have, how dependent will you be, and all those questions should be there at the back of your mind. It is much better to discuss all this and then get into the marriage. Don't get without asking many of these questions. Really, there are tons of questions. It's also important that you make your will with the appropriate assets, and afterwards, if you acquire fresh assets, you may have to make a will for them. If you decide to buy a new house between the two of you jointly, it is important to take adequate term insurance. Checking out how much of medical insurance each person has. Let's say the girl is working in a big company, and the minute she gets married, maybe she's 45 years of age, he could also be covered in her medical. or vice versa. It could be the reverse, could also be true. She could get covered in his medical. Maybe her parents also could get covered in his medical by paying an extra premium. Dull, boring topics, but you cannot get married first time or second time or whatever without asking these basic questions. Don't make that mistake. Thank you.